This is insane HOA madness. And yes, she tried to print the accusation on the spot. I am calling the board right now. That was Lori Hastings, red-faced and jabbing her finger at my chest, standing between me and the mail kiosk at Harbor Point Residential Association in Fresno, California. She had her clipboard in a clear sleeve like it was evidence, and she was shouting that she would block my mail access until I complied. Complied with what? I had no idea. I am a mechanic, I work long hours, and I had just gotten home to grab a package before my shift started again. Now I had this woman in a black puffer vest and blue visor telling me I could not collect my own mail. You stole from the pool fund, Lori said, and until we sort this out, you are not getting access to anything. I blinked at her. I had not been to the community pool in months. I barely used the amenities. I told her I had no idea what she was talking about, and she smiled in a way that made my stomach drop. She tapped the plastic badge clipped to her vest. I will escalate this immediately, she said, like it was a threat she had been saving. She was an architectural committee member, which apparently gave her authority over mail access now. I asked her what exactly I was supposed to have stolen, and she said a bag of new pool wristbands had gone missing after the last community event, and I was the last person near the supply table. I had not been at that event. I told her that. She said the records showed otherwise, and she had a witness. I asked to see the records. She said they were with management, and I would get a copy when the investigation was complete. Investigation. She was calling it an investigation. I asked if she was serious, and she said, "Go ahead and call whoever you want. I have a committee for that." That line landed like a punch. She was telling me she had backup, that this was not just her, that I was already buried. I felt my chest tighten. I had a package in that kiosk that I needed today. The tracking said it had arrived this morning, and if I did not pick it up soon, the claim window would close, and I would be out $200. I told Lori I needed to get my mail right now, and she said that was not happening until I provided a written statement and attended a hearing. A hearing. For pool wristbands I had never touched. She pulled out a battery-powered label maker and printed a notice on the spot. The little machine whirred and spat out a strip of label tape. She stuck it on my kiosk door. No readable text, but she told me it said my access was suspended pending review. I asked her if she had the authority to do that, and she said the HOA granted her emergency powers for theft situations. Emergency powers. I was losing my mind. I asked her again to show me any proof that I was even at that event, and she said the sign-in sheet had my signature. I knew that was impossible because I had been at work that day, a Saturday overtime shift, and I had the time card to prove it. I told her that. She said time cards could be faked. I felt the anger rising. I pulled out my phone and said I was calling management right now. She smiled wider. I will escalate this immediately, she said again, tapping that plastic badge. I called the management office. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Weekend hours. I left a message saying I was being blocked from my mail and I needed someone to call me back. Lori stood there the whole time, arms crossed, watching me like I was performing. When I hung up, she said I should expect a formal notice in the next 48 hours, and if I tried to access the kiosk before then, she would call a towing company to remove my car from the lot. She said it like she was doing me a favor by warning me. I asked her how my car had anything to do with the mail kiosk. She said all enforcement actions were connected, and if I violated one suspension, I was in violation of my HOA agreement, which meant my parking privileges were forfeit. Parking privileges. I lived here. I paid my dues. I had never been late, never had a violation, never even gotten a warning letter. Now I was facing towing threats because she said I stole some wristbands. I looked past her at the kiosk. My package was in there. I could see the orange delivery slip through the little window of my box. I asked Lori one more time to let me get my mail and I would deal with the hearing after. She said no. I asked if I could at least take a picture of the notice she had stuck on my door. She said no. That would be tampering with official HOA documentation. Official. She kept using that word like it gave her magic powers. I told her this was insane, and she said if I had nothing to hide, I should have no problem waiting. Then she turned and walked away, back toward the pool area, her label maker swinging from her hand like a weapon. I stood there for a minute trying to process what had just happened. A neighbor walked by, an older guy named Cal who lived 2 buildings over. He glanced at me, then at the label on my kiosk door, and kept walking without saying anything. That was the moment I realized this was going to be worse than I thought. Lori had done this in public, in the middle of the afternoon where everyone could see. She wanted people to know I was accused. She wanted me marked. I pulled out my phone again and took a picture of the label anyway. If she wanted to call it tampering, fine. I needed proof of what she was doing. Then I walked back to my car, got in, and sat there staring at the steering wheel. I had 3 hours before my next shift started. I needed to figure out how to fight this, and I needed to do it fast. I started by pulling up my work schedule on my phone. The event Lori mentioned was 2 Saturdays ago. I checked my time card app. I had clocked in at 7 in the morning and clocked out at 6 in the evening. 11 hours, no break long enough to drive home and show up at a pool party. I took a screenshot. Then I opened my bank app and checked my transactions for that day. I had bought lunch at a taco truck near the shop at noon, and I had filled up gas on my way home that night. I took screenshots of those too. It was not perfect, but it was a start. I needed more. I needed to see that sign-in sheet Lori was talking about because I knew my signature was not on it. Either she was lying or someone had forged it, and either way I needed to get my hands on it. I called my buddy Jake, who worked dispatch for a local HVAC company that did work for the HOA. I asked him if he knew anything about how management handled theft accusations, and he laughed. He said Lori had tried to pull something similar on another resident last year, accusing them of taking landscaping equipment, and it had turned out she had moved the equipment herself and forgot. He said the HOA had quietly made it go away and told everyone not to talk about it. I asked if he remembered the name of the resident, and he said it was a guy named Martin who lived in Building 6. I wrote that down. Martin might be willing to talk if he knew Lori was at it again. Jake also told me that the management office had a records custodian, a woman named Diane, who was extremely difficult to deal with and refused to let anyone photograph documents. That was going to be a problem. If you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more satisfying HOA justice content. I drove over to Building 6 and knocked on Martin's door. He answered looking suspicious, and when I explained what was happening, his face changed. He invited me in and told me his story. Last year, Lori had accused him of stealing a hedge trimmer from the maintenance shed. She had brought a printed packet to a board meeting and read selected lines out loud to shame him, lines that made it sound like he had confessed. He had not confessed to anything. The packet was full of emails and notes, but half of them were blank pages or repeated headers with no real content. He had demanded to see the originals, and Diane had told him he could not photograph anything, and he would have to schedule an appointment to review them in person. By the time he got the appointment, 2 weeks later, the packet was gone. Diane said she had misfiled it. The accusation was dropped, but Martin said he never got an apology, and Lori still glared at him every time she saw him. Martin said I should get a lawyer, but I did not have lawyer money, not right now. He said the next best thing was to document everything and get witnesses on my side before Lori could spin the story. He also told me to check the community portal because the HOA was required to preserve records, and sometimes they uploaded meeting minutes and incident logs. I thanked him and left. I pulled up the portal on my phone as soon as I got back to my car. The login was a pain, but I got in. I found the calendar for 2 Saturdays ago. There was an entry for a pool maintenance day and supply drop-off, scheduled for 10 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. I had been at work. I checked the incident log. Nothing. No theft report, no missing items, no mention of wristbands. I took screenshots of everything. Then I noticed something. The calendar entry had been edited. There was a little note at the bottom that said last modified 3 days ago. 3 days ago. That was after the wristband supposedly went missing. Someone had gone back and changed something. I clicked into the edit history, but it required admin access. I could not see what had been changed, only that it had been. That was a clue. If Lori had edited the calendar to make it look like I was supposed to be there, or to add details that were not there before, that was evidence she was fabricating the story. I needed to find out who had admin access and whether there was a backup log somewhere. I called management again. This time someone picked up. It was a young guy named Eric who sounded like he was covering the weekend desk. I explained the situation as calmly as I could. I told him I had been accused of theft, my mail access had been suspended, and I needed to see the records. He said he could not give me access to anything without authorization from Diane, the records custodian, and she was not in until Monday. I asked if he could at least confirm whether there was a theft report on file. He put me on hold. When he came back, he said there was no formal theft report, just a note from Lori saying an investigation was ongoing. I asked him if that was enough to suspend my mail access, and he hesitated. He said technically no, but if a board member made the call, he was not going to override it without talking to his supervisor. I asked when his supervisor would be in. Monday. Everything was Monday. I told Eric I had a package in the kiosk that I needed today, and if it was not picked up, I would lose money. He said he understood, but his hands were tied. I asked if he could at least note in the system that I had called and disputed the suspension. He said he would. That was something. I thanked him and hung up. It was almost 5. My shift started at 8. I had 3 hours to figure out what to do next. I decided to go to the pool area and look around. If the wristbands had gone missing from a supply table, maybe there was something there, some sign of what really happened. Maybe a camera. Harbor Point had cameras everywhere. The mail kiosks had cameras. The pool gate had a camera. If I was lucky, one of them had caught something. The pool area was empty when I got there. The gate was locked, but I could see through the chain link fence. There was a folding table near the equipment shed, covered with a tarp. I walked around the perimeter, looking for cameras. I found one mounted on the back corner of the clubhouse, pointed at the gate and part of the pool deck. I took a picture of it with my phone. If there was footage from 2 Saturdays ago, it would show I was not there. I walked back to the front of the clubhouse and tried the door. Locked. I knocked. No answer. I pulled out my phone and sent an email to the generic management address asking for access to security footage from that date. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try. I was about to leave when I heard a voice behind me. It was Lori. She was walking toward me from the parking lot, and she had someone with her. A security guard, not a real cop, just a guy in a uniform with a company logo. She pointed at me and said, "That is him." The guard looked uncomfortable. He was young, maybe mid-20s, and he clearly did not want to be there. Lori told him I was trespassing and harassing her, and she wanted me removed from the property. I told the guard I lived here and I was just looking at the pool area. He asked if I had any proof I lived here. I pulled out my keys and showed him my fob. He nodded. Lori said the fob did not matter because I was under investigation and my access should have been revoked. The guard looked at her, then at me, then back at her. He said he was not going to remove someone from their own property without a formal trespass notice from management. Lori's face went red. She pulled out her phone and started typing. She told the guard she was emailing his supervisor right now and he was going to lose his job for not enforcing HOA policy. The guard sighed. He told her he would file a report, but he was not doing anything else. Then he walked away. Lori turned to me. "You think you are smart," she said. "You think you can just walk around here like you own the place." I told her I did own a place here, and she had no right to block me from my mail or harass me with fake accusations. She smiled. "The rules changed yesterday," she said, "and you should have known." I asked what rules. She said the board passed an emergency amendment giving committee members the authority to suspend access during active investigations. I asked when that meeting happened. She said Friday night, special session, and the minutes would be posted Monday. I asked if there was a quorum. She said that was none of my business. I knew she was lying. The HOA bylaws required 72 hours notice for any special session, and they required a posted agenda. If the meeting had been Friday night, there would have been a notice on Wednesday. I had checked the portal. There was no notice. I told her I would be filing a formal complaint about this, and she laughed. "Good luck," she said. Then she walked away again, back toward her car. I stood there shaking. I had never felt this angry and helpless at the same time. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the clubhouse, the pool gate, and the security camera. Then I left. I had to get to work, and I was already late. My shift was miserable. I could not focus. I kept thinking about that package sitting in the kiosk, about Lori's smug face, about the lies she was stacking up. I made mistakes. I stripped a bolt on a brake job and had to drill it out. My supervisor asked if I was okay, and I told him I was dealing with some HOA stuff. He laughed and said he was glad he rented. I did not find it funny. When my shift ended at midnight, I drove home and sat in my car staring at the mail kiosk. The label was still there. I took another picture. Then I went inside and spent the next 2 hours searching the HOA bylaws and California state laws about mail access. Turns out blocking someone from their mail is illegal. It is a federal offense if you interfere with postal delivery, and even private mail services have protections. I took notes. I drafted an email to management citing the relevant laws. I sent it at 2 in the morning. Then I finally went to bed. Monday morning, I woke up to 3 emails. One was from Eric at management, saying he had forwarded my complaint to Diane and his supervisor. One was from Diane, saying I needed to schedule an appointment to discuss the matter in person, and I was not allowed to bring recording devices. One was from Lori, CCing half the board, saying I had been caught trespassing near the pool and harassing her on Sunday, and she was recommending a formal hearing to determine if I should be fined or have my residency agreement reviewed. Residency agreement. She was threatening to try to evict me. I felt my blood pressure spike. I forwarded all 3 emails to Martin and asked him if he had a copy of the bylaws. He sent me a PDF. I spent my morning reading it. There was nothing about emergency amendments. There was nothing about committee members having unilateral suspension authority. Lori had made it up. I called management and asked for an appointment with Diane. The earliest slot was Wednesday. I took it. Then I called Eric back and asked him directly if there had been a special board meeting on Friday. He said he did not know. He would have to check with Diane. I asked if he could check the meeting room reservation log. He said he would try. I hung up and sent another email to the generic management address, this time requesting copies of all board meeting minutes for the past 30 days, all incident reports filed in the past 30 days, and all access suspension logs for the past 30 days. I cited California Civil Code Section 5200, which gives homeowners the right to inspect HOA records. I knew Diane was going to fight me on it, but I wanted it on the record that I had asked. That afternoon, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I answered. It was a woman named Sharon, the dispatcher for the security company that patrolled Harbor Point. She said she had heard about the situation with Lori and wanted to give me some advice off the record. She said Lori had been calling her office repeatedly over the weekend, trying to pressure the guard who responded Sunday into writing a report that said I had threatened her. The guard refused. Sharon said Lori had then tried to get her to fire him, and Sharon had told her no. Sharon said she was tired of Lori weaponizing her company, and she wanted me to know that if I needed a witness statement, the guard would provide one. I thanked her. That was huge. I asked if she could send me something in writing, and she said she would email me a summary. She did. I saved it immediately. Tuesday, I went to the management office in person. Diane was there. She was exactly as difficult as Jake had warned. She told me I could not see any records until my appointment on Wednesday, and even then I could only review them in her presence. I could not take pictures, and I could not take anything with me. I asked if I could take handwritten notes. She said yes, but she would review my notes before I left to make sure I had not copied anything verbatim. I asked if that was legal. She said it was HOA policy. I told her I was going to bring a witness with me on Wednesday. She said that was fine, but the witness could not take notes or speak during the review. I said fine. Then I asked her directly if there had been a board meeting on Friday night. She said she could not discuss board business outside of scheduled appointments. I asked if I could at least confirm whether the meeting room had been reserved. She said no. I left before I said something I would regret. That night I called a buddy of mine who worked for a local attorney. Not a lawyer himself, but he did paralegal work. I explained the whole situation and asked if he had any advice. He said I needed to get copies of everything before Diane could lose them or alter them, and the best way to do that was to show up with a records request that cited specific statutes and made it clear I knew my rights. He helped me draft a formal letter. We cited California Civil Code Section 5200, Section 5205, and Section 5215. We demanded copies, not just review access. We gave them 5 business days to comply, or I would file a complaint with the California Department of Real Estate. He said that last part would get their attention because the DRE took records violations seriously. I printed the letter and hand-delivered it to the management office Tuesday night. Eric was at the desk. He looked at it and said he would make sure Diane got it. I thanked him. Wednesday morning, I showed up at the management office with Martin. Diane looked annoyed when she saw him, but she did not say anything. She brought us into a small conference room and set a thick binder on the table. She said it contained all the records I had requested. I opened it. The first section was board meeting minutes for the past 30 days. I flipped through them. There was no meeting on Friday night. The last meeting was 3 weeks ago. I pointed that out to Diane. She said if there was no entry, there was no meeting. I asked her to confirm that on the record. She said she just had. I took notes. Martin watched. The next section was incident reports. There were 3. None of them mentioned me or missing wristbands. I took notes on all 3. The third section was access suspension logs. It was blank, completely blank. I asked Diane where the log entry was for my mail suspension. She said there was no formal log entry because it had not been processed yet. I asked her how I could be suspended without a log entry. She said committee members had discretion to issue temporary suspensions pending formal processing. I asked where that was in the bylaws. She said it was an operational guideline. I asked to see the operational guidelines. She said they were internal and not available for member review. I asked Diane if she was aware that blocking mail access without due process was illegal. She said the HOA was not blocking my mail, just access to the kiosk, and I could arrange for mail forwarding if I wanted. I told her that was functionally the same thing, and she knew it. She said if I had a legal complaint, I should file it with the board. I told her I was filing it with the California Department of Real Estate. She blinked. Martin cleared his throat and said he wanted to confirm something. He asked Diane if the packet Lori had brought to his hearing last year was still on file. Diane said she would have to check. Martin said he had requested it multiple times and been told it was misfiled. Diane said that was possible. Martin asked if there was a retention policy. Diane said all records were retained according to California law. Martin asked where his packet was. Diane said she would look into it. I could tell she was not going to look into anything. We finished the review. I had 6 pages of handwritten notes. Diane reviewed them and said they were fine. I asked for copies of the binder contents. She said I had to submit a separate written request for copies and pay a per-page fee. I asked how much. She said 50 cents per page. I asked how many pages were in the binder. She said approximately 200, $100 for mostly blank pages. I told her I would submit the request. Then Martin and I left. Outside, Martin said he had never seen anyone push back on Diane like that. He said most people just gave up. I told him I could not afford to give up. I had a package sitting in that kiosk, and every day I did not get it, I was losing money. Plus, Lori was clearly building a case to find me or worse, and I needed to stop her before it went any further. That afternoon, I got an email from Lori. It was CC'd to the entire board and management. It said she had reviewed the security footage from the pool area and confirmed that I had been trespassing on Sunday with intent to tamper with evidence. She said she was filing a formal complaint with the board and requesting an emergency hearing. She attached a still image from the footage. It showed me standing outside the pool fence looking at the table. That was it. I was outside the fence on common property that I had every right to be on. I forwarded the email to Sharon, the security dispatcher, and asked if she had access to the full footage from that camera. She said she would check with her techs. An hour later, she sent me a link to a cloud folder. The footage was there. I downloaded it. I watched the whole thing. It showed me walking up, looking around, taking pictures, and leaving. No trespassing, no tampering, no interaction with anyone except the guard and Lori. I saved the file and backed it up in 3 places. I drafted a response email. I attached the full footage and pointed out that I had been on common property the entire time, I had not entered the pool area, and I had not tampered with anything. I also pointed out that Lori had lied about the emergency board meeting and the rule change, and I had confirmation from Diane that no such meeting had occurred. I said the same people Lori had said. I sent it. Within an hour, I got a reply from one of the board members, a guy named Dennis. He said he was not aware of any emergency meeting and he had not been notified of any rule changes. He asked Lori to clarify. Lori replied saying the meeting had been a committee meeting, not a board meeting, and she had misspoken. She said the committee had the authority to issue temporary suspensions under their operational guidelines. Dennis replied asking what operational guidelines. Lori stopped responding. I felt a tiny flicker of hope. Thursday morning, I got a call from Eric at management. He said his supervisor, a woman named Paula, wanted to meet with me. I asked when. He said today at 2. I said I would be there. I showed up early. Paula was waiting in the conference room. She was older, maybe late 50s, and she looked tired. She said she had reviewed my complaint and the email chain, and she wanted to hear my side of the story. I walked her through everything. The accusation, the mail suspension, the fake meeting, the trespassing claim, the security footage, the blank records, all of it. She took notes. When I finished, she said she was going to look into it and get back to me. I asked if my mail access would be restored. She said she would make that happen today. I felt a rush of relief. I asked if she could also address the false accusation. She said that was a board matter, but she would recommend they drop it. I thanked her. I went straight to the mail kiosk after the meeting. The label was gone. I opened my box. The package was there. I grabbed it and felt like I could breathe again. But I was not done. Lori had accused me of theft, lied about me, tried to have me removed, and humiliated me in front of my neighbors. I wanted her held accountable. I wanted everyone to know what she had done. I spent Thursday night going through everything I had collected. The screenshots, the emails, the footage, the witness statement from Sharon, the notes from the records review, all of it. I put it together into a single document with timestamps and citations. I called it Evidence of HOA Committee Misconduct. I saved it as a PDF. Then I drafted an email to the board requesting a formal hearing to address Lori's actions. I attached the PDF. I sent it Friday morning. Friday afternoon, I got a reply from Dennis. He said the board was taking my complaint seriously and they would be scheduling a meeting to discuss it. He said I would be notified of the date and time, and I would have an opportunity to present my evidence. He also said Lori had been asked to step back from any further involvement in my case. That was something. I replied thanking him. Then I waited. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. That gave me 4 days to prepare. I printed copies of everything. I organized it into a binder with tabs. I practiced what I was going to say. Martin offered to come with me as a witness. I said yes. Sharon said she would send a written statement if I needed it. I said I did. She sent it Monday morning. It was perfect. It documented every time Lori had called trying to pressure the guard, every false claim she had made, and the fact that the guard was willing to testify if needed. Tuesday came. I showed up at the clubhouse meeting room at 7. The board was already there. 5 people, including Dennis. Lori was not there. Dennis said she had been asked not to attend. He invited me to present my case. I opened my binder and walked them through it. I showed them the time card proving I was at work when the wristbands supposedly went missing. I showed them the bank transactions proving I was nowhere near the pool. I showed them the email from Diane confirming there was no emergency meeting. I showed them the security footage proving I had not trespassed. I showed them Sharon's statement proving Lori had lied about me threatening her. I showed them the blank access suspension log proving there was no formal process. I showed them the edited calendar entry proving someone had gone back and changed the records. I took my time. I made sure they saw everything. When I finished, Dennis asked if anyone had questions. One of the board members, a woman named Carol, asked if I had any proof that Lori had actually stolen the wristbands. I said I did not have direct proof, but I had circumstantial evidence. I showed them the fact that there was no theft report filed until after she accused me. I showed them the fact that the calendar entry had been edited 3 days ago, right before she confronted me. I showed them Martin's testimony about her doing the same thing to him last year. I said it was a pattern and it needed to be investigated. Another board member, a guy named Tom, said they could not accuse Lori of theft without more evidence. I said I was not asking them to. I was asking them to clear my name and to take her authority away so she could not do this to anyone else. Dennis nodded. He said the board would deliberate and get back to me. They asked me to step outside while they talked. I sat in the hallway with Martin for 20 minutes. When they called me back in, Dennis said the board had voted to formally clear me of all accusations. He said the theft complaint was being dropped and my access suspension was being removed from any record. He said they were also launching an internal review of Lori's actions and the committee's operational guidelines. He said if the review found misconduct, Lori would face consequences up to and including removal from her committee position. He said they were also going to require the HOA to preserve records and stop deleting portal uploads. That was better than I had hoped for. I thanked them. Then I asked if I could address one more thing. Dennis said yes. I asked if they could make a public statement clearing my name because Lori had accused me in front of other residents and I wanted them to know it was false. Dennis said he would send an email to all residents summarizing the outcome. I said that was enough. The email went out Wednesday morning. It was short and professional. It said the board had reviewed a complaint, found no evidence of wrongdoing by me, and the matter was closed. It said the board was reviewing internal procedures to ensure fair enforcement. It did not name Lori, but it did not have to. Everyone knew. I started getting texts from neighbors. Some of them apologized for avoiding me. Some of them said they had always thought Lori was shady. Cal, the guy who had walked past me at the mail kiosk, stopped me in the parking lot and said he was glad I fought back. He said Lori had accused his wife of violating landscaping rules last year, and they had just paid the fine because they did not know they could fight it. I told him to ask for a refund. He said he would. Thursday, I ran into Lori in the parking lot. It was the first time I had seen her since the meeting. She was getting out of her car. She saw me and her face went red. She did not say anything. She just grabbed her bag and walked toward her building. I did not say anything either. I did not need to. But I wanted more. The board had cleared me, but they had not done anything to Lori yet, and I knew from Martin's experience that these things could drag out forever and end with nothing. I wanted to make sure she actually faced consequences. I spent the next few days digging deeper. I went back to the security footage Sharon had sent me. I watched the entire day of the pool event 2 Saturdays ago. The footage showed volunteers setting up the table at 9:45. It showed residents coming and going. It showed Lori arriving at 11:30. It showed her standing at the table for about 10 minutes, looking at papers and moving things around. Then it showed her walking to her car with a shopping bag. She came back empty-handed. I rewound and watched it again. The shopping bag. I took screenshots. I sent them to Sharon and asked if she still had the full raw footage from that day. She said yes. I asked if she could send me the segment from 11 to noon. She did. I watched it frame by frame. Lori picked up something from under the table. It looked like a bag. She put it in the shopping bag she had brought. Then she walked to her car. I could not see what was in the bag, but the timing was perfect. The wristbands went missing during the event. Lori was there. Lori had a bag. Lori left with the bag. I sent the footage to Dennis with a note explaining what I saw. I also sent it to Paula at management. I said I was not accusing anyone, but I thought it was worth looking into. Dennis replied the next day. He said the board had reviewed the footage and they agreed it was suspicious. He said they were going to request an inventory of pool supplies and compare it to purchase records. He said if the wristbands were found in Lori's possession, or if there was any other evidence of misappropriation, they would take action. The inventory happened the following Monday. I was not there, but Martin was. He lived closer to the pool and he had volunteered to observe. He called me that night. He said they had found the wristbands. They were in a storage closet inside the clubhouse, in a box labeled with Lori's name. The box also had other items: pool keys, a cash box that was supposed to be in the office, a stack of maintenance receipts that had been reported missing. Martin said Lori had been called in to explain. She said she had been organizing supplies and had forgotten to return them. The board did not buy it. They asked her why she had accused me if she had the items the whole time. She said she thought I had taken them and then put them back. It made no sense. Dennis told her she was suspended from the committee pending a full investigation. Lori walked out. Martin said it was the most satisfying thing he had ever seen. The investigation took 2 weeks. I did not hear much during that time, but I kept getting updates from Martin and from other residents who were paying attention. Apparently, Lori had been using the storage closet as a personal stash for months. She had been taking things she wanted and claiming they were missing or that someone else had taken them. She had been doing it to cover her tracks and to punish people she did not like. The key ring count did not match what she had claimed. She had been keeping extra keys so she could access areas whenever she wanted. It was a whole system. The board brought in an outside auditor to go through the records. The auditor found discrepancies in the petty cash logs, missing receipts, and duplicate entries that suggested money had been taken and then covered up with fake documentation. It was not huge amounts, but it was consistent. Lori had been stealing from the HOA for at least a year. The board held a special meeting to discuss the findings. I was invited to attend. So was Martin. The meeting was packed. Residents who had been fined or accused by Lori over the years showed up. The board presented the audit report. It was damning. They showed the storage closet inventory. They showed the cash log discrepancies. They showed the key ring count. Then they showed the security footage of Lori taking the shopping bag. One of the board members asked Lori if she had anything to say. She was there, sitting in the back. She stood up and said this was a witch hunt, that people were just mad because she enforced the rules, that she had never stolen anything, and that the wristbands were in the closet because she was organizing them. She said the cash logs were wrong because of bad bookkeeping, not theft. She said the keys were backups she had made for emergencies. She said the shopping bag had her personal items in it, and the footage proved nothing. Then she said she was resigning from the committee effective immediately, and she was going to sue the HOA for defamation. Dennis stood up and said she could resign or she could be removed, but either way she was done. He said the board had already referred the findings to the management company, and they were considering whether to file a police report for embezzlement. Lori's face went white. She said they had no proof she had taken any money. Dennis said the audit log said otherwise, and the association was required to preserve records and stop deleting portal uploads. Lori tried to argue, but another board member cut her off and said they were not going to debate it. The meeting was over. Lori grabbed her bag and left. As she walked out, she passed me. She stopped and glared at me like this was all my fault. I just stared back. She kept walking. I never saw her at another HOA event again. The board did file a police report. I found out later from Paula at management. She said they had turned over the audit report, the security footage, and statements from residents who had been targeted. She said the police were reviewing it, but she did not know if charges would be filed. She said the HOA had also banned Lori from serving on any committee or holding any volunteer position for 5 years. She said if Lori tried to run for the board, they would challenge her eligibility based on the findings. I asked Paula what happened to the people who had been fined or accused by Lori. She said the board was reviewing all cases from the past 2 years and offering refunds or account credits where appropriate. She said Martin had already gotten his fine refunded. I asked if there was anything else I needed to do. She said no, I was clear, and she appreciated me pushing back because it had exposed a much bigger problem. I thanked her. The aftermath was quiet. Life at Harbor Point went back to normal, or as normal as it ever was. I got my mail without drama. I went to work. I came home. I did not see Lori around much. I heard from other residents that she had stopped coming to the pool and the clubhouse. Someone said she was planning to sell her unit and move. I did not care where she went as long as she was gone. Martin and I stayed in touch. He said he was thinking about running for the board next election just to make sure they did not let anyone like Lori take over again. I told him I would vote for him. Cal stopped me one day and said his wife had gotten her fine refunded and they were grateful I had fought back. He said a lot of people had been afraid to speak up because they thought the HOA was untouchable. I told him nobody was untouchable if you had the receipts. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail from the HOA attorney. For a second, I thought Lori had made good on her threat to sue, but the letter was not from her. It was a formal apology from the board. It said they regretted the way my complaint had been handled. They acknowledged that the suspension of my mail access had been improper, and they were implementing new procedures to prevent similar situations in the future. It said they had established a formal appeals process, they were requiring all committee actions to be logged and reviewed by management, and they were conducting training for all volunteers on resident rights and due process. It also said they were offering me a refund of my HOA dues for the months I had been dealing with the situation. I did not ask for that, but I was not going to turn it down. The check arrived a week later. It felt like a small victory on top of the big one. The real payoff came a few months later. I was at the mail kiosk one afternoon when I saw a new notice on the bulletin board. It was an announcement from the board. It said they had completed their review of past enforcement actions and had identified multiple cases where residents had been improperly fined or accused without due process. It said the HOA was issuing refunds and formal apologies to all affected residents. It listed the new procedures, including a requirement that all theft accusations be accompanied by a police report, all access suspensions be approved by management in writing, and all committee decisions be subject to board review. It also said the position of records custodian was being restructured and Diane was being reassigned. That was the part that made me smile. Diane had been just as much of an obstacle as Lori, and knowing she was being moved out of that role felt like justice. I ran into Sharon one day at a coffee shop near my work. She recognized me and waved me over. She said her company had dropped the Harbor Point contract because they were tired of dealing with board drama, but she wanted me to know that the guard who had refused to file the false report had been promoted. She said his supervisor had made it clear that integrity mattered more than keeping difficult clients happy. She said she had heard through the grapevine that Lori was being investigated by the district attorney for embezzlement, but she did not know if charges had been filed yet. I told her I hoped they were. She said she did too. We talked for a few more minutes, then she had to go. As she left, she said she was glad I had not let Lori get away with it. I said I was too. The last time I heard anything about Lori was about 6 months after the whole thing started. I was talking to Martin at the pool, and he said he had seen a for sale sign go up at her unit. He said she was moving to another state. I asked if she was trying to avoid the investigation. He said he did not know, but he would not be surprised. He also said the board had finally released the full audit report to the membership, and it showed Lori had taken over $3,000 in cash and supplies over the course of 18 months. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to be a crime. He said the HOA had filed a civil suit to recover the money, and if she did not pay, they would put a lien on her unit. I asked what happened to all her authority theatrics, her clipboard, her label maker, her plastic badge. Martin laughed and said she probably still had them, but they did not mean anything anymore. That was the truth. All her power had been fake, built on intimidation and lies, and the second someone called her bluff, it collapsed. I still live at Harbor Point. The HOA is not perfect, but it is better now. They enforce the rules more fairly. They actually respond to complaints. They keep records. When I go to the mail kiosk now, I do not feel anxious. I just grab my packages and go. Sometimes I see other residents and we nod at each other, and I know some of them remember what happened. A few have told me they were glad I stood up to Lori because it made them feel like they could push back too if they needed to. That matters to me. I did not set out to be some kind of HOA hero. I just wanted my mail, and I wanted to clear my name. But in the process, I helped break a system that had been broken for a long time, and I made sure a thief and a bully could not hurt anyone else the way she tried to hurt me. That feels like enough. I appreciate you sticking with me, and I will see you next time.